In November of the year 2000, a stranger appeared on a small internet forum. He did not introduce himself with a vague prophecy. He did not warn about the end of the world. He logged in, claimed to be a soldier from the year 2036, and began answering questions. He spoke about a war that had not happened yet. He described an old computer that almost no one in the public talked about. And he described a machine built into a vehicle that he claimed could move a person between points in time. For more than a year, he posted. People asked, he answered. Then, sometime in early 2001, he said he was going home, and he disappeared. The post remained, saved by readers, copied across the early web, compiled into archives that still exist today. His name became one of the most discussed mysteries in internet history. He called himself John Titor. But the strangest part is not what John Titor predicted, it is the one detail people still argue he may have known too early. Welcome to Kitsune Files. Before we go further, a careful note. Everything attributed to John Titor in this story comes from archived forum posts. He claimed many things. Almost none of his major claims have been verified. This is not a story about proof. This is a story about a legend that refuses to disappear, and a small number of details that even skeptics find difficult to fully dismiss. So, who was John Titor? According to the archived posts, the user first appeared under the name time travel underscore zero on the Time Travel Institute forum in late 2000. Around the same time, the name John Titor began appearing on the Art Bell Post to Post board, a community built around the late night paranormal radio program. The posts under both names share the same writing style, the same claims, and the same alleged mission. He claimed to be an American military time traveler born in 1998, living in Central Florida in the year 2036. He claimed his unit was based near Tampa. He claimed that his world had survived a long civil conflict followed by a short but devastating world war, and that society in 2036 was rebuilt into smaller, tighter communities. His stated mission was simple. He claimed he had been sent back to 1975 to recover an old IBM computer. Florida, 1975, was where his grandfather lived. He claimed he was using the trip back as an opportunity to also stop briefly in the year 2000, the time of his own early childhood, to observe the past and answer questions from people online. That is the entire setup. A soldier, a mission, a stop along the way, an open invitation to ask him anything. People did ask, and he answered for months. To understand why this mattered, you have to remember what the internet looked like at the time. In late 2000, social media did not exist. Smartphones did not exist. Most homes still use slow dial up connections that cut off when the phone rang. Online communities were small, forums were strange, niche, and often invite only. Strangers who joined and posted long, detailed, calm conversations were not common. Someone showing up and steadily answering questions for months in character with internal consistency took real effort. It was the kind of presence that built a small audience just by sticking around. One of the most quoted exchanges from that period is the conversation he had with a user called Yaresa. The conversation took place in a private chat in October of 2000, before the John Titor name became widely known. He was still using the time travel underscore zero username. Yaresa would later release a transcript of the chat to the public, and that transcript became one of the foundational documents of the legend. It is a long, patient, occasionally dry exchange. He never lost composure, he never bragged. He answered technical and personal questions the same way, slowly, in the same calm voice. For people reading those archives today, that tone is part of what makes the story unsettling. His tone was unusual. He did not write like a fantasist. He did not push agendas. He answered patiently, sometimes politely, sometimes with mild irritation when readers tried to corner him. He provided technical detail when asked. He gave personal answers about food, faith, and family when asked. He drew diagrams. He posted photographs of what he claimed was his time travel vehicle with a small device installed in the back seat. He never sold anything. He never asked for money. He never created a website. He never appeared on television. He simply posted, replied, and left. The legend survived because of the source trail, the original posts on the Time Travel Institute forum, a separate set of posts on the Art Bell community, a long instant message conversation with a user known as Eureka, archived and published online, and later, a complete compilation of his posts uploaded to public archives, including a text file preserved on the Internet Archive. Without those archives, the story would have faded into the noise of early internet folklore. Because of them, every claim he made is still readable today. Anyone can sit down and read his actual words. That accessibility is part of why the legend has refused to die. That brings us to the detail that started everything. The detail that, more than any predicted war or political claim, made some people pause: the IBM 5100. In his posts, Titor said the entire reason for his trip was to retrieve this specific machine. The IBM 5100 was a portable computer released in 1975. It was heavy, expensive, and aimed at scientists and engineers. By the standards of the time, it was advanced. By the standards of today, it is a relic. It is not the kind of machine that an average person in the year 2000 would casually mention. According to Titor, the 5100 was needed in 2036 to debug ancient computer systems. He referenced what is sometimes called the Unix 2038 problem. This is a real and well-documented issue in computing. Many older systems store time as a count of seconds from a fixed starting date. On certain 32-bit systems, that number reaches its maximum value in January of the year 2038. After that, the clock can overflow and behave unpredictably. Engineers in the real world have been quietly working on this issue for decades. Titor claimed that in his timeline, this problem cascaded across critical legacy systems and that the 5100 had a specific capability that made it valuable for solving it. This is where the story becomes harder to dismiss casually. According to historians of computing, the IBM 5100 did have an unusual feature. Under the right conditions, it could run programs written for older IBM mainframe languages, including legacy code from System/360 and similar systems. This was not widely advertised. It was not in the standard marketing. It was the kind of detail you would only find in technical documents, internal IBM materials, or by speaking with engineers who had actually worked on the machine. When Titor mentioned this, some readers checked. The capability was real. Skeptics argue that the information was technically available to anyone willing to dig. Retro computing hobbyists existed even in the year 2000. Manuals existed. Forums existed. A determined hoaxer with the right background could have learned the detail and used it. But for many readers, this is the moment the story stopped feeling like a typical internet role play, because the average prank account in the year 2000 did not casually drop accurate, obscure mainframe trivia in the middle of a time travel claim. One possible explanation is that the author was a computing professional who had spent time around old IBM hardware. Another possible explanation is that the author was, as he claimed, someone who already knew. Neither explanation can be proven. Both still circulate. This brings us to the machine. Titor described his time travel device in detail. He called it a C204 gravity distortion time displacement unit. According to the post, the device used two microsingularities, tiny artificial points of intense gravity, contained inside what he called magnetic housing units. Around these units sat a complex assembly, an electron injection manifold, cooling systems, radiation venting, gravity sensors he referred to as VGL units, several extremely precise cesium based clocks, and a small computer system that managed the entire process. He said the machine was mounted inside a vehicle. In some posts, that vehicle was a 1967 Chevrolet. In later posts, a different model. The reason for using a vehicle, he claimed, was simple. The machine did not teleport. It moved through time while staying physically in place, and the surrounding world could change around it during the trip. A vehicle gave him a way to leave wherever he landed. He described what he claimed the experience of time travel felt like: light bending around the vehicle in the first seconds, a period of total darkness, a sharp rise in heat, a pocket of stable, breathable oxygen inside the cabin, a constant low hum from the unit behind him, static electricity crawling across surfaces, and he warned real radiation risk. He claimed travelers had to monitor their exposure carefully and limit how often they traveled. It is important to be clear: the C204 device, as described, is not a real engineering blueprint. It is a description that appeared in forum posts. Nothing in the public scientific record confirms that such a machine exists or could exist. The micro-singularities he described are not something humanity knows how to create or control. This story is not a guide, it is a record of what he claimed. What makes the description interesting to some readers is its tone. It does not read like a typical fantasy. It reads like a person trying to describe technical equipment in plain language, the way a soldier might describe a piece of military hardware to a civilian: functional, procedural, slightly bored. Skeptics see this as a sign of careful craft. A good hoaxer mimics the tone of an engineer. Believers see it as a sign of authenticity. Neither side can prove the other wrong. The posts remain exactly what they are: words on a forum. He also described the world he claimed to have come from. In his version of 2036, Central Florida was rural and rebuilt. Cities were smaller. Communities were tighter. Many people grew their own food. Religion played a larger role in daily life. Travel was harder. Trust in large institutions was lower. Education was often local and practical, taught by experienced adults rather than centralized systems. He claimed that the United States had gone through a long internal civil conflict beginning in the early 2000s and intensifying over several years, involving factions, irregular forces, and a slow collapse of federal authority. He claimed that this was followed by a short, brutal global war in 2015 involving nuclear exchanges between major powers. In his account, the country that emerged on the other side was smaller, slower, more cautious, and in some ways more grounded. He answered questions about daily life. He talked about food, family, music, work, and the rhythm of survival. The tone was not dramatic, it was quiet, almost nostalgic, as if describing a hard but real place that he missed. None of this happened in our world. There was no American Civil War beginning in 2004. There was no World War ending in 2015. There was no public breakthrough in time travel during the timeline he described. By the standards of normal prediction, John Titor was wrong about the largest and most specific claims he made. This is where the legend gets complicated, because Titor anticipated this problem. In his posts, he explained that time travel does not move a person along a single fixed timeline. Instead, he claimed it moves them between world lines, parallel versions of reality that differ from each other in small, sometimes large ways. He said the timeline he came from might be slightly different from the timeline he traveled into. He estimated the divergence at a small percentage, enough to explain why some details might not match. For believers, this is a key part of the story. It allows the predictions to be wrong without the story being wrong. The Civil War happened on his world line, not ours. The World War happened on his world line, not ours. He simply arrived in a version of reality that branched off, and his job was never to warn us. His job was to retrieve a computer. For skeptics, this is exactly the problem. A claim that cannot be tested is not really a prediction. If every failed forecast can be explained by saying it happened in a different reality, then the story can never be disproven. And in careful thinking, a story that can never be disproven is also a story that can never be confirmed. In his posts, Titor put a number on this divergence. He claimed the world line he arrived in differed from his origin by roughly 1 to 2%. He said small differences would be barely noticeable, but the further back the change point sat, the larger the effects would become over time. He used this to explain not only failed predictions, but also why some readers might find details of his world that did not match anything in their own history. It was an elegant idea. It also conveniently removed any way to prove him wrong. This is the difference between a prediction and an unfalsifiable escape hatch. The world line idea is interesting, even poetic. It draws from real concepts in theoretical physics. But the way it is used in the Titor story removes it from the realm of evidence. It becomes a story device, not a testable claim. So, what, if anything, did John Titor get right? This is where careful wording matters. There are details people say he got right. There are details that turned out to be wrong. And there are details that are too vague to evaluate. On the side of details, people highlight as interesting the IBM 5100 capability was real. The Unix 2038 problem is real, and engineers are actively addressing it today. The general anxiety he described around political division, social instability, surveillance, declining trust in institutions, and growing local self reliance has been a recurring theme across many countries since he posted. The way online communities would later obsess over archived digital mysteries, preserving them, debating them, building entire subcultures around them, is exactly what happened to his own story. He also described a future where civilians carried small portable computers everywhere, communicated constantly, and were tracked through them. In 2001, that was a notable detail. In 2026, it is simply our lives. He warned about declining trust in traditional news media. He predicted that people would increasingly get their information from decentralized sources they curated themselves, often choosing voices that confirmed what they already believed. That broad pattern, regardless of who was right or wrong about specific events, has clearly unfolded. He warned about the normalization of constant surveillance, both by governments and by private companies, and described it as something the public would slowly accept without ever really agreeing to it. That too has happened in the way many critics now describe. He warned about deepening political division inside the United States. He said the country would become increasingly unable to share a common picture of basic facts, and that public conversation would feel less like debate and more like two different countries talking past each other. That description again fits the period that followed his posts more closely than not. He talked about a slow erosion of community trust at the neighborhood level, balanced by a rise in small, tight, self reliant local groups. Anyone who has watched the growth of preparedness culture, off grid living, homesteading, and intentional community movements in the past 2 decades will recognize that pattern, even without the war he predicted. None of this proves anything supernatural. Many social critics in the year 2000 were already worried about these trends, but the consistency of his atmospheric forecasts is part of why the legend has aged better than most online predictions from that era. He made other specific claims as well. He referenced new discoveries in physics at large particle accelerators. He referenced changes in the Olympics. He referenced the way governments and citizens would clash over basic questions of trust and authority. Some of these claims read in retrospect as broadly atmospheric. Others were specific enough to fail when the dates passed. Believers often select the broadly true claims and call them hits. Skeptics select the specifically false claims and call them misses. The honest reading is that both exist in the same archive. He also posted images, photographs of what he described as his vehicle with a small device in the back seat, a schematic style diagram of the C204 unit with labels and component layouts. None of these images have ever been verified as anything more than a regular vehicle with regular equipment, but they added to the texture of the story. They made it feel like a case file rather than a forum thread. But these details, taken together, do not prove the time travel claim. Public anxiety is a broad target. Legacy computing problems were already known to engineers in the year 2000. Portable devices were already being developed. The IBM 5100 detail, while striking, has a non supernatural explanation available. None of this is the same as documented future knowledge that no human in 2000 could possibly have had. On the side of clearly failed predictions, the major political and military forecasts did not happen as described. There was no civil war on the timeline he gave. There was no global nuclear exchange in 2015. There was no public arrival of time travel in the years that followed. The Olympics did not end as he suggested. The specific dated events were not borne out. Perhaps the most striking miss is something he did not say at all. John Titor was posting actively in the months leading up to September of 2001. In his version of history, the major shaping event of the early 21st century in America was supposed to be a long internal civil conflict, not a single foreign attack on a major city. He did not warn about the September 11th attacks. In all of his many posts during early 2001, the topic does not appear. For believers, the world line divergence idea covers this. For skeptics, it is a glaring omission. A time traveler from 2036 with detailed memory of his recent past said nothing about the single event that defined the decade he was visiting. He also predicted that the 2004 United States presidential election would be deeply unstable, with widespread unrest and contested results that pushed the country closer to open conflict. The actual election was decisive. The country was divided, but it was not in revolt. He predicted that within a year or two of his posts, the European Particle Physics Organization, CERN, would announce a discovery that would make limited time travel possible, or at least theoretically achievable. They did not. CERN has produced real and historically important physics results in the years since, but none of them involve time travel in any recognizable form. He predicted that the 2008 Beijing Olympics would be heavily disrupted by global tensions, possibly the last Olympic Games for some time. The Games went forward as scheduled and were among the most watched in history. His predicted nuclear exchange in 2015, sometimes called End Day in his posts, did not occur. The world remained tense in that year, sometimes dangerously so. But no global nuclear war happened in 2015 or in any year since. He also gave specific warnings about food safety, particularly around beef and the spread of certain rare diseases, that did not unfold at anything close to the scale he described. The pattern is consistent. Broad atmospheric claims often track loosely with later events. Specific dated predictions tend to fail. A skeptic would say this is the signature of any well-written future fiction. A believer would say the world line divergence makes the specifics impossible to match exactly. Both arguments can be made. Neither resolves the question. The burden of proof in any extraordinary claim rests on the claim itself. Pointing out that some background details were plausible is not the same as evidence of time travel. So if it was not real, what was it? There are several theories. The most common is that John Titor was a piece of early internet roleplay. The late 1990s and early 2000s were the golden age of online storytelling. Forums were filled with people experimenting with personas, fiction, and shared world building. A long form character claiming to be from the future fits naturally into that culture. Another theory is that the author was someone with real technical knowledge, a retro computing enthusiast, a programmer, a military hobbyist, a science fiction writer testing material, someone who knew enough about old IBM machines, timekeeping, and computing history to make the story feel grounded in a way most hoaxes never achieve. Another theory is that the posts were a collaboration, more than one person building on each other's ideas, refining the story over time, keeping a consistent voice through shared notes. A final theory is that the story was a kind of viral experiment, long before the word viral meant what it means today. A test of how far a single well crafted online myth could travel. If that was the goal, it succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. There have been investigations over the years. Some researchers have pointed at specific real people they believed were involved. Some of those names have been disputed, some have been quietly dropped. Out of respect for accuracy, this episode will not repeat unproven accusations. The point is that every serious explanation, except the one Titor himself offered, is a human explanation. None of them require time travel, and yet the story still works. More than 2 decades later, people still read the archives. New videos appear every year. The legend is not fading, it is hardening into folklore. There are reasons for that. John Titor arrived at the perfect moment. The Y2K scare had just passed, leaving behind a strange aftertaste of uncertainty about computers and the future. Late night radio, especially the kind hosted by Art Bell, had built a massive audience hungry for paranormal mystery. The internet was new enough that people still trusted strange voices on forums. The Cold War had ended, but a feeling of unease had not. Into that exact moment, a calm, articulate voice appeared online and said, "I am from the future and I will answer your questions." The story mixed everything: military mystery, old computers, future war, time travel physics, personal answers about food, family, and faith. It was interactive in a way that traditional prophecy never was. You could ask, he would answer. That feeling of dialogue, of being part of the mystery, made it stick. And it gave just enough specific detail to feel real, enough open ended uncertainty to stay unsolved, enough technical grounding to invite serious people to look closer, enough strangeness to keep casual readers coming back, enough silence at the end when he simply stopped posting to leave the door open forever. That is the formula of a legend that survives. So, what was John Titor? He may have been an internet hoax crafted by a talented writer with a quiet sense of timing. He may have been a brilliant early internet role play that grew beyond its creator's intentions. He may have been a collaborative piece of fiction polished by multiple hands. Some readers still believe he may have been a warning from another timeline, knowingly imperfect, deliberately ambiguous. The honest answer is that we do not know. What we do know is what remains: a set of archived posts, a described machine that no one has built, a list of predictions that did not unfold, a handful of technical details that even careful skeptics admit are interesting, and a question that refuses to settle. If a time traveler did appear online, would we recognize the warning, or would we archive it, debate it, and turn it into a legend? Was John Titor a hoax, a storyteller, a mistaken believer, or something stranger? Tell me your theory below. This has been Kitsune Files. The archive is open. The case stays open with it.